Hello everyone and welcome back to DMG. This is the Wyse CX0. It's a tiny thin client, barely bigger than a 3.5-inch hard drive, that's known as being pretty good at running DOS games. However, that's really not that impressive. After all, it is just a tiny computer in here, and DOS will run on damn near anything with a power cord. So today, we'll be seeing just what this 1 GHz via Eden CPU can truly do. We're going to be running some 3D games, some modern operating systems, and pushing this to its absolute limits. So join me as I melt this poor little thin client with some much newer games and, well, much newer software than it was ever intended for. Let's get right into it. Before we talk about anything else though, we should discuss its factory specs. As I mentioned, it features a 1 GHz 32-bit via Eden CPU of the C7 architecture. This is a low-power CPU released in mid-2005 for embedded applications and thin clients just like this. This thin client originally came with 256 megabytes of DDR2 RAM and a 128 megabyte flash card holding its operating system. I will demonstrate this operating system. It'll only take about a minute because there's very little to see. It's a basic Linux distro that, well, its whole purpose is to allow you to connect to another computer or master server remotely. Since this was never built to run an OS natively, being a thin client, it's supposed to access resources from a more powerful server or computer in some server room somewhere. For such a small device, it's actually rather well featured in I/O. Back here we have a connection for the wireless antenna, a 12-volt power plug, PS2 keyboard and mouse, DVI video out, gigabit LAN, and dual USB 2. On the front we have dual USB 2, headphone out, and mic in, and the power button. And that's it. Removing the top is not very difficult at all. It just requires one screw and a bit of wiggling and prying. There's not much to the lid. It just features a medium-sized copper heatsink for cooling the memory chip. I've upgraded my unit to 1 gigabyte of 666 megahertz DDR2 because, well, that's kind of the bare minimum for what we're going to be doing with it today. There's not a lot to see in here. It's a very basic machine. Under here is our processor. This is a 3-layer heatsink with 3 of these little copper layers, and it actually cools the processor quite well. This consumes very little energy. Here is our wireless card. It goes in an odd little, I believe it's a proprietary slot, and this is compatible with 802.11g from what I can find online. Here is the IDE header, so that's where your flash card would plug in, but you can put in any IDE device if you've got a laptop IDE cable, so that's what we're doing today. And finally, here's our chipset. It's very small. So with the hardware covered, I will put the stock IDE flash module back into the thin client so that I can quickly demonstrate the Wyse Thin OS that came on this device. My sincerest apologies here, but I will have to film off the monitor for this video because for whatever reason, my capture card doesn't like the DVI output from the onboard graphics. Just powered the thin client on. It takes almost no time to boot into its little integrated operating system here. Maybe 10 seconds to get to the desktop. And here we are. Again, this will be very quick because there's little to see here. We can see our connected Wi-Fi network, connected Ethernet, and here, this is kind of information about the device. It tells you CPU activity, free memory, and you know, what's going on the network. So sent and received packets. So here we can see our SSD, or 128 megabyte SSD, and this is why my capture card really doesn't like this thin client. It's a 1080p display, but it only runs it at 2944 by 1080, which is odd. The maximum resolution of the graphics chip is 1920 by 1200. So again, I'm very sorry, but I will have to film off of the monitor. There's very little else to see here. We've got a start menu type thing where we can configure network, remote connections, central configuration, which is just, you know, your settings. Here is the server it would have originally connected to, and that's all there is here. This is all this interface does. I mean, you had to fit it into 128 megabytes, so of course it will be very basic. It needs to do very little. So that is it for the Wyse operating system. Let's get to something a bit more interesting. This is Windows 7 Professional 32-bit. I had this hard drive laying around and I thought it was appropriate. It's a little IDE laptop drive from Hitachi that's actually half length. Funky little drive for a funky little computer. And it just plugs in like any other IDE cable, and then you can power on your system. And right here, you're seeing Windows 7 x86 running natively on this thin client. This is just bare metal hardware. This isn't remote desktop into a different machine. We can see right here that in hardware info, here is our VIA Eden 1 gigahertz CPU on our VX855 chipset. Here is our DDR2 RAM, and this is the graphics chip, an S3 Chrome 9. Here's our little CPU usage. Just dragging around a window puts a lot of load on the processor. The basis of ranking CPUs in my comparison table is the Cinebench R10 multi-thread score. However, this CPU won't open Cinebench R10. I assume it lacks the necessary instruction sets to actually open it. Like, it lacks the hardware features that R10 needs to run the test. Therefore, I instead ran Cinebench 2003 and got a score of 47. So that places it as the worst CPU that I have ever tested. But that's really not surprising. It's not meant to be fast. It's meant to consume very little power. The motherboard is made by Inventec, and it has one PCI slot. I suppose that would be for connecting to the wireless card. That's just my assumption. And again, here is our Chrome 9 graphics card. And if anyone is curious, this is the model number of the tiny Hitachi drive. It runs at eIDE ATA6, so that's about as fast as laptop IDE will get. So that's good. We'll go ahead and close out of this. Again, just to prove that I'm running this actually on the thin client. Again, there's our VIA CPU. But let's just get right into it. Let's launch Unreal Tournament and see how it does. I have not actually tried any games on this yet. I've just installed the operating system. So I'm curious to see. Oh! Wow! Look at that.
In 2291, in an attempt to control violence among deep space miners, the New Earth government legalized no-holds-barred fighting.
I downloaded this from my server, so I believe the config file has it already to max settings. Oh, the mouse lag is horrible. There's so much input lag. Okay. Wow, this is... What? Okay. So it defaulted to 1920 by 1080. And then again, I have everything set to the high setting. So yes, the config file that downloaded with the game is maybe a bit too much for it to handle, but it handled the opening not pre-rendered cutscene very well. So let's just do a quick match in codecs and see how it goes. A lot of input lag, very slow. This is running not great. This is not running well at all, but it's remarkable that this system can actually handle it. Let's change our screen resolution to something that the tiny thing can actually handle. How about 1024 by 768? It'll definitely be able to handle this. Oh, that's much better. It's about... No, actually, it's a little worse. It's a little worse than late 2000s Intel GMA, like, graphics. So those are the graphics chips that you would find integrated onto the chipsets of Core 2 series CPUs, whether that be, just Core 2 Duo, Core 2 Quad, mobile, or desktop. They're all about the same graphics chip. So this is what you could expect from like a lower end laptop around 2008, 2007, 2008. Yeah, this is not running great, but considering that this is a thin client that was never supposed to run games at all, the fact that it's handling a 3D game with no big issues, I mean, it's not fast enough, clearly. But if it was just, clocked higher, it would be totally fine. Like, there's not a major issue like lack of DirectX support or anything like that. Well, let's try another map here. The brightness is very odd here. Unreal Tournament 99 is typically a very dark and moody game, but it appears the S3 graphics chipset is having none of that. This is incredibly bright, and I do have my monitor set pretty dark so that it looks okay in the video and doesn't just wash out the camera. So anyway, point is, this is running very well, and I am pleasantly surprised. Let's try Quake 3 Arena. This should run fine. Well, okay, so this uses OpenGL. Looks like we're not going to be able to run it. Let's try GTA 3. I honestly would be a bit surprised if this runs okay, because I don't think the GPU will be as much of a problem as the CPU will be. It's at least loaded the intro FMV, so that's a good sign. We don't have the massive input lag like we did on Unreal Tournament. Let's turn the draw distance down, and yeah, let's leave it there. I doubt it can handle much more. Ooh. Ooh. Oh god. Motion blur. Who invented motion blur? Yeah, this is this is not good. I think with motion blur off, if there's... Yeah, there we go. Let's see if we can do this. Oh god. Well, it's not terrible. This is at the absolute lowest settings. Wow, okay, so we're getting maybe double-digit frames per second. Oh wait, this is GTA 3. The cars are made out of, like, paper. You run into anything and you explode. Let's see. Yeah. So I would not call this playable, considering I'm running it at 640 by 480 in 16 color mode, or 16-bit color depth, sorry. And it's running like this. So that's, that means if you turn the resolution up any higher, it'll be even more slideshowy. Oh? For a few seconds there, we were getting a higher frame rate. Yeah, not great. I also want to try San Andreas. There we go. So this might just run at a double-digit frame rate. Okay, so that took quite a while to load, but we're in. I don't think this cutscene is pre-rendered. I don't think this is FMV. Yeah, no, this is not FMV. I love this cutscene, but I do want to play the game. Oh god. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Fun fact, the SA in GTA SA stands for slideshow animation. This is not what I would call playable, and I think you can see why. No one should play any video game like this. Hello, bonk. Nerd. Yeah. This is bad. I was, I put Vice City on the hard drive. I wanted to try Vice City, but that'll be pretty bad as well. Let's see if I can make this gap. Oh no! Yeah, so that's not good. Those are in fact all the games that I had on Windows 7. So clearly, we can see it tries its hardest. It puts up a pretty impressive showing for a 2005 low-power CPU. But let's try and install a newer operating system. The newest we can put on here is Windows 10. I can't put Windows 11 because it's an x86 CPU, and Windows 11 is 64. God damn it. Well, the fire alarm just went off because some asshole microwaved ramen without putting water in it first. So it caught on fire. But, back to what I was saying. The latest Windows operating system to have a 32-bit version, which this processor will hopefully support, is Windows 10, so I'll be installing that. I've got this WD laptop hard drive. Hopefully it'll run fine on the thin client. Really the only problem I can foresee is the 1 GB of RAM. I tried to install a couple 2 GB sticks, but the 3 kits I had on hand, none of them worked. So we are stuck with 1 GB of RAM. Well, unfortunately, I must say that Windows 10 actually didn't work at all. I was really excited to try it out, but just like Cinebench R10, the CPU probably doesn't have whatever extensions that Windows 10 needs to run correctly. So it looks like Windows 7 x86 is the absolute newest this can handle. I did try some web browsing on it,
but I can't even like show any of that footage because it would just be a snooze fest. Like, pages took a good minute to load. It's just like, you know, stuff like YouTube, etc., with a lot of images. So unfortunately, there's actually very little you can do with this above like Windows XP. I'd say maybe some light 2D games on Windows XP and some light 3D games, you'd have a great time. But maybe pushing it all the way to Windows 7 was a bit far. So that's where I'm gonna wrap up this video. This was quite the quick one, but there's not much else I can talk about here, so I don't want to just drag it on for ages. I loved looking at this fun little thin client. I mean, it was a good like $14. Definitely worth picking up if you want to just mess around with one. It's not like really locked down and hard to use like I thought it might be. It just works like a tiny computer, and mini PCs are definitely a thing nowadays, but they weren't in 2005 when the CPU came out. Obviously they were a thing, but you couldn't just like easily buy one for personal use like you can now. So this is it's a bit of an odd little thing, and I'm glad I got to take a look at it. But with that, I'm gonna wrap up this video. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I hope you'll join me again next time.